Hello everyone, Ryan Smith here. I am a real person and not AI, and we're going to take a deep dive into snails today. Check it out. We're going to start off our journey into the snail world with two of the most common snails, the pond snail and the bladder snail. The pond snails are usually larger than bladder snails, and they typically have a longer, pointier shell. They are great at eating all of the algae and mulm in the aquarium. Now, of course, they don't eat everything. And some people do claim that they chomp on their plants. Well, this really only happens when they run out of other sources to eat, and it's usually only the softest leaves of the plants. Otherwise, they are great in a natural aquarium for controlling algae, as long as you don't overfeed them. That's when they turn into those pests that everyone warns you about. Moving along, we have the bladder snail. These can be found mostly everywhere, just like the pond snails, even when you don't want them. And, well, they're a little bit different from our pond snails. They don't have the typical Yoda ears that the pond snails have. As you can see, their tentacles are quite a bit thinner. And also their shell, it is what I think a little bit more pretty than the pond snail, having many patterns. But as you can see, they both are great at scraping the glass. They will be eating all sorts of algae, detritus, animal matter that may fall, and in general, keep your natural aquarium nice and clean, and maybe even do a little bit of bioturbation while they're at it. If you're wondering what that is, well, it's basically helping that mulm to get mixed into that sand layer there, because they're going to be going and making sure that it finds all the tiny little crevices at the bottom. So, another great snail to keep in your aquarium. And it could probably be found locally, even at pet stores that don't want them. So give it a try. Now we move on to a personal favorite of mine, the Ramshorn snail. Ramshorn snails can come in a variety of different colors, some in the pinks, browns, blues, and some even have patterns on their shells. Others can be nearly transparent. These snails are fairly quick to reproduce, much like the pond snails and the bladder snails, and that is completely controlled by how much food you are giving them. If they have a lot of leftover food that fish are not eating, or a lot of decaying plant matter, sure, their numbers will rise. But otherwise, they are a nice peaceful inhabitant, slowly coasting over the substrate, the glass, your plants, you name it, doing their job of cleaning up any algae or debris that may be around. Yes, Ramshorns are a great addition to the natural aquarium, and if there is one that I could pick out of all of this, it would be them for you to introduce to your own aquarium if you have yet to try them. An interesting fact about the Ramshorn snail and, well, pond snails and the bladder snails is that they're all hermaphroditic, which means that they possess both male and female reproduction capabilities. And so as long as you have two snails, well, you're going to have more. So keep this in mind when ordering snails. You don't need to order a whole lot of them unless, of course, you plan on feeding them to, I don't know, your loaches or your pea buffers. But me, I would rather just have the snails than have something that eats them. One last thing to note, please do not get Ramshorn snails confused with the giant Colombian Ramshorn snail, which is in fact not a Ramshorn snail and instead an apple snail, which will eat your plants and is probably not the best choice for a planted aquarium. The next snail on our agenda is the Malaysian trumpet snail. These guys you often won't see in your own aquarium if you do have them because, well, they're a little bit shy. They tend to come out more so at night, so if you are going to see them, it's good to take a flashlight to the aquarium and spot them hanging out on the glass, perhaps on the plants. But during the day you may find them down low, where there could be some shady spots and they would feel less threatened. An interesting thing to note about the Malaysian trumpet snail is that, well, they can produce parthenogenically, which means that they are able to make little copies of themselves without having any sort of reproductive partner. While these snails perform much the same function as ramshorns, bladders, and pond snails, these ones have the added ability of boring quite deep into the substrate. And with that ability comes a benefit for the planted aquarium. We're able to get mulm down deeper. They're also able to pop any little bubbles that may have formed due to any gases of anything that's reacting underneath that sand layer, and therefore are a must-have addition to any planted aquarium, and I highly recommend that you go out and go find some quickly. And, well, finding them might be a pretty easy task too, because, well, it tends to be that these particular snails are a nuisance in a lot of pet stores, and so if you go in there and you spot some of them hanging out on the glass, you might even be able to score some for free. One last little tidbit. You may notice that this Malaysian trumpet snail has, well, a bit of whiteness to the end of its shell. These snails are great for letting you know whether or not your water is becoming too acidic, or if it's starting to lack some of the certain hardness that these snails need to build their shells. We've arrived at the king of glass cleaning, the Nerite snail. It is able to tackle some of the hardest green spot algae, and, well, any other algae that it can find on any other surface. That radula that you're seeing is quite effective at scraping just about any surface it can come across. Much better than really any of the other snails, which has earned it the king of algae scraping. And an interesting fact about these is that they reproduce in saltier waters, so if you were ever worried about having too many snails, this is the one that you might want to get, because they are not able to reproduce in our freshwater tanks. Though you may find that they will lay some small hard white eggs on occasion. Perhaps the smallest and most mysterious of the bunch is the Freshwater Limpet. As you can see, it's a very small snail, and, well, it has a very flat shell as well, keeping it very much close to the surface. It was actually quite hard to try and zoom in the camera enough to get any good shots of these because of their small size. Typically you'll find them as little clear circles on the sides of the glass. And yes, they will do the same job as most other snails, but their small size means their impact is much less. Well now, this is a grim scene. Snail shells everywhere, not a snail in sight. What could be the cause? Of course, the assassin snail. While some people think that these might be the solution to their snail problem, I would definitely advise otherwise. These little predators, while they might look like other snails, they will hunt down those other snails and eat them alive, straight out of their shell. Yeah, that little attachment on the front there, that is a wonderful way of squeezing in there past their perculum if they should have one, and eating them from the inside. And, well, they're actually quite effective at it. While it may start out slow, these snails will eventually get all of the other snails that they could possibly find in the tank. I tried this myself once, and where I had wonderful snails that were cleaning the glass, doing bioturbation, I now had assassin snails, which did not clean any of the glass and only helped to stir up a little bit of mulm in their ever-present search for more prey. There's one thing to note. At least they need both a male and female to reproduce, though as long as you have one, you might get lucky enough that they won't be reproducing and eating all of your snails in your tank very fast. And I will say, if they do happen to run out of snails to eat, well, sometimes the little shrimp that might come over and try and clean their shell could be their next meal. I've witnessed it. They will take down a shrimp down to the bottom, never to be seen again. Thanks for joining us on our little journey into snails. There are quite a few more out there to explore for your personal aquarium. And if you happen to like this video, well, please leave a like, maybe subscribe if you want to learn more, and don't forget to leave us a comment down the bottom there. What's your favorite snail or favorite snail story? And as usual, stay curious, and we'll see you later.